Good morning. Great to be together today. And isn't it a good thing to serve a living God? You know what I love about being a Christian is for all the good that was inside of Ronald Reagan. Um, and then we go to, I don't know, all the things that were decided, but let's go back further. When I was first a Christian, Jimmy Carter was running for office when I first got saved. And someone said, "Oh, you got to vote for the Christian." I think you might vote for the guy who could do the job. But that's what somebody said recently. They said, the one guy I'm more thankful for Joe Biden than anybody else is Jimmy Carter, because now he's not the worst president ever. And but oh, from the Bushes or Clintons, Obamas, Trump, Biden's, the whole thing, it's a mess. And it's just a mess. And yet, you know what we have? We have the hope, the assurance, not hope that perhaps it'll happen, but the strong assurance, the confident hope. The word hope in the Bible is not a maybe. It's what we're looking forward. It's not here yet, but we know it's coming. And we've got this assurance, and everything's okay. And you may have your car break down, and you may have a health problem, or your child has a health problem, or whatever. But I want to encourage you. You've got a great God. And whoever's in that White House, my God's in charge. And whatever the price of gasoline, my God's in charge. Whatever the price of groceries. Now, my life might be difficult. Paul the Apostle, better Christian than me, he said, "I know how to abound. I know how to abase. I know how to be full. I know how to be hungry." And it's going to be okay. God's got a plan, and we're going to live through this thing. Now, it's just great to be saved. It's great to know that everything's okay. Now, I want you to, if you didn't hear me, the last video I did, I'm going to guess it was a couple days ago, I talked about overreacting. And there are more, and I've been reading my Bible, and there's more. I don't know, I might do 3 or 4 of these, but just in 2 Samuel chapter 9, I'm going to read you another verse or two, just a situation. And if you didn't get to hear it, you can probably go back and hear it. But I think it's important that Christians have enough character to be careful with their response. And if you've driven on icy roads, you know what overcorrecting means. And there's a lot of things we overreact to. And I think the medical world overreacted. I don't know if it was all malice and evil intent from the beginning, but certainly people overreacted to COVID. And people overreact to all kinds of things in the physical world. You know, some kids, get their head knocked in riding bicycles. So now we make a law. Everybody's got to wear bicycle helmets, everybody under a certain age or whatever. And we need to be very careful about reacting. Reacting can cause an awful lot of problems. And you know as well as I do that there are times you've been in a situation that you wanted to act, but restraint held you back. And later you were glad you did restrain, because had you gone ahead, you would have been wrong, or you'd have gotten in trouble, or whatever it might be. I'm not an angry person. I don't have a temper, and I don't go around filled with hatred and all. I might worry. I might have some dismay, I don't know what you'd call it. Days that I fret over the circumstances of life. I don't know what you'd want to call it, worry or whatever. But the Bible says, casting all your care upon Him, and the Bible says, fear not and fret not and trust. And so somewhere along the way, I gotta trust that God's still good. And so all that to say that this thing, we all have those moments. But let's just take the thing of anger. To hit somebody, I heard the story of somebody that a lady had backed over her husband in the car and killed him. And looking into it, they said, she just said it was accidental. And they said she might have gotten away with it, except she went back and forth several times. Now that's an overreaction. Had she gone over him once, she might have been okay. But anyway, so she got in trouble. But that's our overreaction. And I want to show you another story. This is in 2 Samuel 9. And this is while David is on the throne. and fairly new on the throne. And Saul, the prior king, Saul's son, Jonathan, was David's best friend. And they were dear, dear friends. Jonathan was next in line to be king. And when they got close, Jonathan, it was figurative of turning over the authority. He took his sword and his bow and arrow, I think, and he gave them to David, saying, "You're the king. I'll follow you. And you're going to be the next king." Of course, his dad was still king at that time. Well, David ends up, Saul and Jonathan, his son, die, and David's on the throne. And David gets settled on the throne, and he says to one of the servants of King Saul, the guy's name was Ziba. He said to Ziba, "Are there any left of the house of Jonathan that I could show him good? That I can't do anything for Jonathan, he's dead, but could I do something for his children?" And in 2 Samuel chapter 9 and verse 3, and the king said, "Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show kindness of God unto him?" And Ziba said unto the king, "Jonathan hath yet a son, which is lame on his feet." And so the story goes on. David goes and sends people. They find this guy. He's living in poverty, a place called Lodabar, the land of no bread, just like a ghetto maybe. They bring him back, and he says, "Mephibosheth, I want you to have all that was your dad," that's Jonathan, "and all that was your grandpa," that's Saul, "all their land, all their wealth, all their servants. But he said, I want you to eat at my table like you're one of my children, one of my adult sons." And like David had all of his boys sitting at his dinner table, he said, "I want you to sit with us." And Ziba, the guy who was Saul's servant, who was aware of Mephibosheth, he said, "Ziba will serve you. His kids will serve you. All his kids will serve you, and all these people will take care of your estate and your animals and your fields and harvest everything. You're rich, but I want you to stay with me." And that was a time of prosperity and a time of peace. And then you go down the story a little bit further in chapter 15, and Absalom had rebelled against his father, David, and he was taking over the throne. He was maneuvering, politicking his way into position, and then he was literally going to go into a military overthrow, and Absalom was going to take the throne. Now, David, he wasn't going to fight against his son, and so he said, "I'd rather leave." And so he and some loyal people that want to go with him, they're leaving town through the valley of Kidron. We've talked about it, kind of I don't know, almost like a sewer, a drainage off the city, a rough area. They were slipping out into the wilderness. And the priests came with the Ark of the Covenant to follow him. And David said, "Oh, no. If God's in this, I'll be back. But that Ark belongs there in Jerusalem. And you leave it there. And if God's pleased with me, I'll be back. And don't worry about it." And then along the way comes Ziba. Now remember, Ziba was the servant of Saul. And David said of Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, "Ziba, you serve, you and your sons and your servants, you guys take care of Mephibosheth's stuff." And so Ziba comes along with food and drink and stuff and catches up with David and says, "I brought some provisions for you." And he said, "Where's Mephibosheth?" And he said, he's going to stay back in Jerusalem. He's going to be the new king because his dad was the king, and maybe now he can be the king. Now, this is a terrible time. If you want to read chapter 16, verse 3, 2 Samuel 16, verse 3, and the king said, "Where is thy master's son?" And Ziba said to the king, "Behold, he abideth at Jerusalem, for he said, Today that shall the house of Israel restore me the kingdom of my father." And this is a terrible time. David's own son's trying to kill him. David lost the throne, lost his city, lost his job, lost his reputation, lost his everything materially. He's slipping out into the wilderness like a refugee. And this guy comes along and gives him bad news, gossip, slander, all kinds of things you could put to it. And David makes a decision. Now, here's a thought, because we talked in the last session on overreacting. Be very careful. When you're hurting, your decision maker is broken. And you need to be very careful about making decisions. David didn't have to make any decisions on this day. And when things are going wrong, it's very good to duct tape your mouth And don't make any choices, don't make any decisions, because you can make some pretty bad choices. And so you notice there in verse 4, then said the king to Ziba, behold, thine are all that pertain to Mephibosheth. He said, I'm giving you everything. Everything that I gave to Mephibosheth, it's yours. And you can tell a little bit about the story by the way Ziba reacts, and then later how Mephibosheth reacts. If I remember, I'll read that. But at the end of verse 4, Ziba said, I humbly beseech thee that I may find grace in thy sight, O Lord, my Lord, O King. Ziba was very happy to take all that wealth. So David goes down to the wilderness. The things that happen in the next few chapters, there's battle. Finally, Absalom dies, and David is brought back to the throne and brought back to Jerusalem where he belonged. Now, as he's crossing over Jordan back into the land of Israel where he was, where he lived, Mephibosheth comes down to meet him. Go over to chapter 19. Chapter 19, and down at verse 24. So they're not even back into town yet. They're just from the wilderness. They've crossed the river and they're coming up where it's a long, slow ascent up to Jerusalem. And in verse 24, Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down, which is a grandson. That's something to remember. Called him the son of Saul, but he was the grandson. So when you start, people say, well, here's a conflict in the Bible. Well, maybe it's just your vocabulary doesn't match their vocabulary, because we know Mephibosheth was Saul's grandson. He was the son of David, or son of Jonathan. But that's another study. Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king, and had neither dressed his feet, nor trimmed his beard, nor washed his clothes, from the day the king departed until the day he came again in peace. And it came to pass, I'm in verse 25, that when he was come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, wherefore wentest not thou with me, Mephibosheth? And so I got the story off. Another guy named Shimei met him as he crossed the river. Mephibosheth didn't get to meet him until he got into Jerusalem crippled. He wasn't able to travel without great help. And so he comes back. He hasn't shaved. He's in mourning. He's in grief. He's in the not trimming your beard, your hair, not bathing. It was a sign of mourning before God, begging God. He'd been praying for David, asking God to help David. And David says at the end of verse 25, wherefore wentest thou not with me, Mephibosheth? And he said, my Lord, O King, my servant, that's Ziba, deceived me. For thy servant said, I will saddle me an ass, that I may ride thereon and go to the king, because thy servant is lame. And he hath slandered thy servant unto my lord the king. But my lord the king is as an angel of God. Do therefore what is good in thine eyes. For all of my father's house were but dead men before the Lord. On and on. And he said, I was just in poverty, and I was going to die, and you were so good to me, so you do whatever you want. Well, you can read the verses that follow. And David said, all right, well, tell you what, I've already given all that you had to Ziba, so let's split it. Ziba gets half, and you could get half. Now's how you can tell whose motives and intents are right. Let me see if I could find this. I should have looked at it before. And verse 29, and the king said to him, why speakest thou any more of thy matters? I have said that thou and Ziba divide the land. And Mephibosheth said unto the king, yea, let him take all, for as much as my lord the king is come again in peace to his own house. Mephibosheth said, I don't want any of it. Keep it. Let Ziba take it all. I'm just so glad you're here. Now you could see people's response. But you see, back when David's son was trying to kill him and he's lost his throne and lost everything, he's leaving town. In that hour, David was broken. And when people are broken, they don't make good decisions. Now, two thoughts on this. One, when you're hurting, be very careful about making decisions. When there's a death or a tragedy, a divorce, whatever, I try to encourage people, please don't make big decisions. Please don't make dramatic changes in anything. Take some time and think through and get good advice. Secondly, if someone you know is hurting, maybe a friend or a coworker or your spouse or whoever, and they handle a situation not well, let's just say, don't you be too hard on them. Here's somebody for years and years has been faithful, and in this moment they make a bad call. Don't erase all their good life because in a tragic hour they made a bad decision. David had been faithful through all these years and blessed by God, and all right, in a tragic hour he was unwise. But don't kill your friends. Don't throw a friend out. Friends are few and far between. Don't throw a friend out because You see them in a difficult spot. Maybe he's saying some things they shouldn't or acting with it. Man, you don't know. You just don't know the grief. And remember Peter cursed and denied the Lord 3 times in one night. That's pretty serious. But man, it was his life was at stake, and the Savior had been arrested, and who knows what was going to happen. And there was that pressure, and Peter didn't react right, and he went out and wept bitterly, and he came back. Aren't you glad Jesus didn't write Peter off? Aren't you glad God didn't just throw Peter to the wind? Here a guy gets slandered, and if you go back to the lesson from the prior lesson on Hanan, and that story in 2 Samuel 10, 40,000 people died. 40,000 because wrong advice got to the king, and the king listened. Now let me just say this: in 40 years of pastoring, I have watched people make decisions on wrong counsel, and I have seen tragic results. I've sat in a living room or in an office with someone, and they're telling me the advice they're getting, and I'm thinking that is so wrong. That advice is so wrong. And my heart breaks because I don't know everything, but I know some things, and I can see the trail they're going to follow if they follow this advice, and it's tragic. And the number of people hurting themselves, hurting those they love. And I'm thinking, you got the wrong advice. You listened to the wrong person. And you're on a very, very tragic road. And it might be you're having problems in marriage, and you're talking to someone at work who just lost their marriage, and you're getting advice. Don't get advice from them. And they talk you into walking out or, doing whatever. And those are not good people to get advice from. I heard about a book someone wrote. I didn't see the book. They were talking about it on the radio. And it was a lady who was writing a book to women on how to prepare for divorce, because you're going to marry this guy. Be prepared. And it's all these instructions in this book: how to get money set aside without him knowing about it, how to get your name and your finger into different assets he has, so when you divorce, you'll have more. And I'm thinking, what a horrible advice. What wretched advice. What an evil woman. And we don't need that kind of thing. Now, a couple of quick thoughts. Don't make serious decisions when you're hurting, I said. Number 2, try to be patient with people that act foolish when they're hurting. Hurting people do not act right. They might be in trauma after a car accident, or they might be in emotional trauma after their loved one is in a car accident. Number 3, a friend who makes a bad decision in a time of tragedy, try to keep him as your friend. Try to put parentheses around that little window and pull it out, and try and push a faithful life together, and try and be their friend. Now, I've lost friends, and I'm still their friend, but people have listened to things and heard things and believed things, and I think, don't do that, man. This is a lifetime friendship you're throwing to the wind at the advice of someone you don't even know. And what craziness this is. Next, a friend who makes countless wise decisions, and then you see something that looks, maybe you think, they shouldn't be doing that. And again, I'm not talking criminal things, but the way they handle a situation, hiring, firing, whatever it might be on a job, or the way they respond to a situation. Be very careful. It might be, if you saw the whole story, it's not anything wrong at all. It might be you just saw something, and your perception, how 2 referees see different things from different angles. Just give people the benefit of the doubt. Be slow. I said in the last lesson, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, overreacting. And I may do this another day. I've just reading. There's so many. This is a great section of the Bible on stories of overreacting. Let's keep believing in people. I'm going to keep believing people are good. I have a friend, and some people just set out to ruin him. And he said they're good people. He said, I told my wife, now look, they've always been good people. And they maybe they shouldn't have acted this way, but I'm not gonna erase a lifetime of good because of how they handled this. And to love people. What a great character trait. Now, again, in our culture, you might get in trouble for loving people, but I've had people get mad at me for who I'm friends with, and I remember that story. Jesus was slandered, saying he is a friend of sinners, and he eateth with them. Well, you know what? If being a friend of a sinner or being slow to react, if it gets me in the same category with the Savior, I'll take it. And let's be good to people. Let's all be good to people. I love how Dr. House closes radio broadcast every day. Be good to everybody because everybody is having a tough time. And again, we don't have all the facts. We don't know the whole story. And let's keep loving people because God so loved the world. What a God we serve. Have a great day.